All right. Anyway, so you got infinitesimals, really, 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 really small things, and then things you might want to be a little bit bigger or whatever. And anyway, I really do know the secret of male enhancement. It involves secret Asian herbs. A secret recipe is lost to history, except I just found it. I didn't really find it. I'm not really doing this, by the way. Um, it involves four things, and let me get my handy dandy old notepad over here so I can type these four things up. Four things for male enhancement. If you want to get a little bit more girth, uh, and that's what it really does help. It helps girth. I wouldn't know from experience, but you need four things. What are those four things? Oh yeah, and let me tell you, I really am going to talk about like infinitesimals. I'm going to start by talking about analytic neurology, the thing that I made up, and how it correlates to the third eye. Then I'm going to talk about varying degrees of disentanglement and variational autoencoders, and then I'm going to talk about the cause of persistent hallucinations after psychedelic trips, and like what can cause persistent hallucinations, which is kind of a rarely experienced side effect. Actually, I think it might be a little bit more common than people think, but I have a theory for why that can occur and how it occurs and how your brain kind of neurologically adapts during a psychedelic trip, which is kind of like a period of like increased like neural like flexibility. Like your neural networks are more likely to adapt for better or worse, usually for worse, because it's just chaotically like you're just chaotically kind of bombarding your neural networks with a bunch of shit that they're not like. It's not like true change that emerges from within. It's just a bunch of like random 5-HT receptor activating stuff just kind of all over your brain all at once. But it can provoke positive change, but also, especially if it's overused, can provoke like negative change in your brain. However, one of the effects that people notice is persistent visual hallucinations. They're not really hallucinations. There's this picture that's been going around on Facebook where like there's this like orb sitting in a thing. It's like one of those posters that you'll see where you'll look at it and it's not moving, but the image appears to be moving to your mind. That's similar to like the kind of hallucination that you would experience during a psychedelic trip. And the reason is because systems which are normally visually overdetermined in terms of systems philosophy then become underdetermined because your neurons are misfiring. And then I'm going to talk about how this connects to an authentic transformative spiritual experience, and then actually connect the psychological individual spiritual experience to a sociological to a spiritual experience with like sociological implications. And then from there, I'm going to start talking about infinitesimals and how infinitesimals are like the problem behind trauma, and really like the way that human minds experience infinitesimal, the way that human minds process and adapt to to events with infinitesimal probability as though they are no longer infinitesimal is why trauma is so hard to untangle once a trauma has like began to take hold of someone's mind and to transform someone's mind. Basically, what happens is they start to see events which are really unlikely and extremely rare, or should be extremely rare under normal circumstances. They see those traumatic events as being like very likely, or at least not infinitesimally likely. So those events no longer have the realistic, true, infinitesimal probabilities associated to them, and then cause people's minds, like from a very low level, to perceive those events and their likelihood as like constant threats. So they're so somebody's mind who's like undergone trauma is constantly thinking that something like the trauma is going to happen again, and they don't know where it's going to come from. But basically, from a very low like neuroanalytic perspective, like what's happening is that the analytic like systems that are represented by your neural circuits like have attuned themselves to like anticipate the probability of a traumatic experience as like being like much more likely than it should be considered being, and it's because of an informational flaw. It really has nothing to do with neurology and has everything to do with information systems, and specifically information systems which like judge the probability and adapt to the probability of events as those information systems experience those kinds of events. So it's really like, and there's all these things like related to psychology that are really informational. They're not, it has nothing to do with, and this is what's scary about connecting this to artificial intelligence is what's scary, because artificial intelligence will have many of the same flaws as human psychology because these things, these flaws are a result of the informational nature of information processing systems. It's not so much a consequence of the particular hardware or wetware that an information system is processing upon. There are certain flaws of the hardware or wetware, like there's certain flaws inherent to your brain that you'll not share with artificial intelligence that's built from like classical computing hardware or quantum computing hardware. However, there's far more that like information computing hardware, whether it's like in your brain or in a quantum computer or in a classical computer, there's far more that hardware will share because of the informational and mathematical like nature of the information processing systems. And so that's what I'm trying to get into. And it all has to do with like the paradoxes of infinitesimal probability events, and the paradoxes of like systems that don't know what the correct answer is. They're analytical systems, and you're going to see different kinds of analytical, like different kinds of the definition of analytical, like kind of showing up again and again. I've got neuroanalytical ideas, which really bridge the psychoanalytical ideas of Jung, from analytical psychology, with analytic neurology, or what I'm calling analytic neurology. And then you've got analytic systems, which are like analytic models of other systems. Well, so every machine learning algorithm is effectively an analytical system, and it's trying to approximate some function that it doesn't know the numerical answer to that function, but it's trying to approximate something that is close enough to it, such that it sufficiently emulates that numerical system. So there's different kinds of definitions of analytic, but anyway, so I'm going to start with the whole penis enlargement thing. Anyway, so there's four, which is just kind of which is just kind of like a almost kind of a joke. Infinitesimals in the Secret of Male-Enhancement. Number one, you're going to need a vasodilator. Vasodilator. This makes the blood vessels like bigger than they normally would be. Vasodilator. Secret Asian herb. Ginseng. Ginseng is good. You're going to want Panax ginseng. And this is real, folks. This is real life. And so Asian secrets to male enhancement. All right. And I'll get back to like the psychological stuff in a second, but you're going to a vasodilator. You're also going to want let's see what else. I know this is you're gonna want a penis pump. And then you're going to want to familiarize yourself with something called Jelqing. And then you're going to want to spend hours and hours and hours. Well, maybe not. Let's delete that fourth one. You're going to want to know what Jelqing is. And there really was a fourth one, though. I just can't remember what it is. And so what this is going to do is you're going to pull more blood into your blood vessels, and your blood vessels are going to widen. They're going to accept more blood than they normally would. Cialis or Viagra might help because that does something to the nitrous oxide system, which would cause more of an effect. Oh yeah, and then you're going to want to and I'm not even kidding. I'm not even kidding. This is the secret to male enhancement. And you're going to want to apply the ginseng topically. Topical application of Panax ginseng. And there really is a magical amount here. A magical concoction, a magical potion for, well, we're not going to call it a magical potion, but it's just basically like you want to be able to make sure you want to optimize the membrane permeability of the ginseng. That's very important. That's the secret. The secret is a topical application of Panax ginseng in combination with the penis pump. And what this does, and I'm not kidding, folks, this is real. This is science. This is what science does. This is what vector calculus does, is it tells you, like, if you want a local effect, you have to act locally. So, and so what this will do is widen the blood vessels. And I'm not going to sell you anything, by the way, because that's bullshit. Don't ever buy anything. It's bullshit. Maybe buy Panax ginseng. And then what the penis pump is going to do is it's going to widen, like it's going to like cause changes in the surface of the skin. So it's going to pull blood into the into your penis, and the blood, if you also, so you have to apply the Panax ginseng topically, and then you also have to apply the Panax ginseng, you have to take it orally too, and you're going to pull the blood in, and then you're going to use the Jelqing to move the blood around. That's going to open up the blood vessels, and what's going to happen, you want to do a very, very, very small amount of vascular damage. If you see any bruising whatsoever, you've done it wrong. You want to do like a small amount of a very small amount of like capillary damage. And I don't actually know much about the vascular system, so some doctors may correct me, but you want a little bit of capillary damage that your penis can recover from. Which means if you see any bruising whatsoever, you've done it wrong. And then you're going to want to do something called Jelqing. And actually, you probably don't even want to do this. I've got like, not even lying here. Because you're going to have to, like, spend a lot of time beating your dick. But I swear to God, it'll work. Anyway, and not only does it works and gives you girth. And that's what you want, right? So, anyway, that's Jelqing. Sometimes you shouldn't like navigate the internet unattended for too long. But look at this. Look at this. I mean, look at that O face right there. I mean, how could you argue with that? That's what it does, folks. And we're done. We're done with the thing to lure people in to watch. Now we're going to talk about real things. Because let's be real, I'm in like a CIA, like, you know, I don't really know. I don't know it's CIA, but it sounds more exciting if I say it like that. But I'm in like a Phantom Zone. A Phantom Zone is like from Superman 2. Or maybe it's Superman 3. I don't know. It's not the Superman where It's not the Superman they mentioned in Office Space, I know that. But it's like the prison of Zod, and the prison of Zod is this like hyperdimensional, like, or transdimensional prison where they lock this guy into, and he can't ever escape. Is, well, it's hard to explain. But anyway, that's that. And now I'm going to talk about real things. So, one thing that I want to do is take the. Sorry, I know it's like a little hard to believe. Why would I talk about this? Well, all right. So, I'm gonna go to my images. I'm gonna find one of these images because I would like to like notate these photos. Oh, not that one. I guess that's probably embarrassing. We're looking for the very end of this. The gradation of the unconscious. The effect that infinitesimals have. Here we go. And so what I'm going to do is translate this into bullet points, and then, and actually I'm going to do it in a text bag because I don't really want to write in the fucking text box and then lose everything. Who's ever had that happen to them before? Me, I have. Raise your hand. It's me. Alright. So this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to type. Oh, I've got a mouse here. Isn't that wonderful? I kind of forget sometimes. Those headphones out of the way. I'm not going to be able to listen to music because if I listen to music, my video will be taken down because of copyright asshats. Alright. The effect that infinitesimals have especially in statistical models and systems theory. And I guess this really needs to be even larger because if I can't read it over here, I'm just assuming that anybody, like, I mean, if you're watching on your phone, you're fucked. Sorry. And actually, if you're watching on Facebook, you might not. Well, yeah, it definitely needs to be bigger. That's what she said. That's why I gave you guys the Asian secret to male enhancement. Yeah, have on. Somebody reword this. In statistical models and systems theory, and once I really get into this stuff, I'm incredibly passionate about infinitesimals, and you're gonna see a lot of intuition that I have into these like mathematic systems that I really shouldn't have if I wasn't like some kind of like weird math like philosophy prodigy, because like I'm gonna start talking about gradations of infinitesimals and like the order of infinitesimals and then the distribution of infinitesimals that derives from like having infinitesimals in numerically derived models, and the differences between infinitesimals in numerically derived models and that of analytically emulated models, where analytical models are emulating some unknown, possibly unknowable numeric system. And this is what I'm saying. Like, I just want to be able to have the ability to like do this like in some kind of college or some kind of like, I would like to just be tapped into some kind of system that lets me like do what I'm good at and helps me like deal with the things I'm not good at, because I'm really, really, really good at certain things, and then I'm kind of like epically bad at other things. So, so the effect that infinitesimals have on how and I'm going to connect infinitesimals with psychology and philosophy, have on how people model systems, develop beliefs about confidence. God damn it, I can't like switch between these different keyboards. Confidence. Then I've got these stickers on here that like, so I've got stickers. I don't know if you can see this, but they're stickers with an actual like Japanese and actual Korean keyboard, so I can learn to type and like as the native people type. But what it does is it ends up covering the home keys, so it like I end up mistyping all the time. It's kind of annoying. In fact, I might be able to fix that right now. I'm gonna just do that real quick because it's really annoying. Let me take the old razor blade. Oh, maybe not. That's a little rusty. I'm going to try to do this real fast. Yeah. Not very good. This is worse. I think it'll work though. Merp. This is what's responsible for me typing the wrong thing every 5 seconds. Especially now, I think. Yeah. Yep, there we go. I don't think I'm cutting into the keyboard. And then I'm going to connect this to consciousness. And like my ideas are actually very powerful, and I don't really like, I mean, I don't read nearly as much as I should, but I do like try to find information where I can, and I don't see a lot of things like my ideas. But a lot of the stuff that I'm like consuming is really just like basically like oversimplified and like kind of regurgitated for the masses. So it's like heady spiritualism, you know, and really watered down. Excuse me. I don't really know how to arrange this. Okay. I guess just like this. That'll be fine. This is good. This is fine. All right. So, how people model systems, develop beliefs about confidence, and beliefs about confidence are viral, by the way. And they're viral in a way where you unconsciously spread them without understanding how you're spreading beliefs about confidence. And it's something that kind of ruins my life, by the way. And it's, since it's unconscious, it's hard to really fault anyone else for it. It's really like my own like struggle to make people feel confident in me, and then kind of virally spread positive beliefs about confidence unconsciously without understanding what they're doing, instead of virally spreading negative beliefs about confidence. And beliefs about confidence are really beliefs about probabilistic expectations, which is what this E is. This E means expectation. So beliefs about confidence are beliefs about expectation of probabilistic events. Whoops. Let's see, miscalculate. Let's see, struggle with. I'm like still mistyping a lot. So, let's see, miscalculate. It is responsible for a lot of miscalculation. Hey, what's up, Sadie? I'm talking about systems theory. And let's see, struggle with. It's still not helping. Trying to get adjusted to this new keyboard. Struggle with unknown unknowns is a good way to put problems with infinitesimals. And that's really what Donald Trump is talking, or not Donald Trump, Donald Rumsfeld. When Donald Rumsfeld is talking about unknown unknowns and trying to measure unknown unknowns, he's talking about dealing with whatchamacallit, parts of the system where you don't really understand like what the structure is, and then because you don't understand what the structure is, it's difficult to assign a probability to something of which you don't know what the structure is, because you can't, if you can't structure it, you can't really model it. So you have to essentially fill your model. Like there's several different options for dealing with that. Respond to traumas, traumatic or rare experiences, and this is because attempting to model event types for which there is no precedent or extremely rare precedent, then it requires turning our value system, requires turning our values systems and models of systems upside down. Why? Because because the expectation of events, which seemed to have had, and this is kind of a misnomer, almost never probability. Now appear to be more common, more frequent in P of E terms than they did before, or than the average person would tend to believe that they are. And again, why? Thus, to the person experiencing the event with infinitesimal probability, the event no or system experiencing the event with infinitesimal probability, the event no longer appears to be infinitesimal, basically. And thus, and in the context of psychological adaptation, or in the context of psychology, especially especially psychology with respect to traumatic events, with high magnitude impacts. So, for example, like a car accident, or emotional trauma, or the result of a particular relationship, et cetera, et cetera. With high magnitude impacts, let's see. Yeah, so examples of this could include a car accident. Like you experience like a traumatic car accident, you have to go to the hospital, nobody died, but the next couple of days on the road, or the next couple of weeks on the road, or perhaps like for the rest of your life, you expect this event to be more probable than you should. But the higher the magnitude of the impact is to you personally, the more that your system and they're very subconscious systems. I'm talking about very subconscious systems. Like the more your subconscious is likely to overestimate the probability of this event occurring in the future, even though you've experienced it and you're now mitigating like the risk. And even though you are trying to mitigate for a risk that you believe is more realistic than it actually is, you're forever going to be affected by that traumatic experience to anticipate it. Most likely, that's how your subconscious is going to respond, and your consciousness is going to respond like given the information that that is exposed to it by the subconscious. The person or system then responds to that event, infinitesimal with individualized responses and motivations that motivations and coping mechanisms that seem to be distorted or inordinate to others. So phenomenologically, this is a purely this is a purely informational effect that the existence, and you might argue that it's noumenological, since it, and yeah, like this is a purely informational effect that the existence, or experience of the infinitesimal has on the reevaluation of belief systems, and this is why hey TJ, what's up? This is why like traumatic events can actually spur a like reevaluation of how you see yourself in, with respect to the world, or how they can cause like large changes in your psyche, and they can cause like major shifts in your value systems and in everything else, because you've experienced something that is exceedingly rare, and that you believe to be something that is now like more frequent than infinitesimal, basically. And let's see, reevaluation. Let's use this like kind of syntax to for brevity. Of beliefs about the probabilistic expectation of similar events in the future. And these are things that are just kind of general, like see, and this causes complex destructuring of systems, which render many game theory or systems theory models wildly inaccurate. And this is something that is very difficult to get past in artificial intelligence. Defects of information theory, systems theory, etc., that pose major challenges for artificial intelligence. And this is because since these are not defects of a model per se, but purely defects, but purely informational. Informational consequences based on the stroke of luck of having experienced some some range of infinitesimal set of events. So the same AI or person could re-experience a typical experience, typical set of typical life or set of experiences, and emerge with a different collection of infinitesimal probability events that because of the high magnitude impact of their experience on the analytical systems evolution, completely necessitate a divergence in the direction of their specific development. So you could have the same AI model re-experience its training or re-experience its life, and just based on it's gonna experience a certain number of infinitesimal events, but ontologically, those infinitesimal probability events are going to be completely different. And just based on the sequencing of those infinitesimal events and the capacity for those infinitesimal events to impact the structure of the artificial intelligence model or the structure of the person's psyche, completely decides a completely different direction in their development. And it's purely informational. It's not a consequence. This is no consequence of the hardware or wetware that it's running on. These are purely numenological. I think that's correct. And I'll look up the definition in just a second. These are purely numenological consequences. These are purely purely numenological. Doesn't matter, whoops. The specific hardware type does have some correlation to the types of effects these high magnitude events can have. There are some depending on whether or not it's an artificial intelligence running on wetware in the human brain, or artificial intelligence running on quantum computers, or artificial intelligence running on classical computers, it can have a strong impact on how these infinitesimal events can occur, and how the designers of such a system can compensate for them. But there's really no I don't think there's any real solution to how I don't think there's any real solution for how people can how designers of artificial intelligence can compensate for these events, because you can't anticipate what collection of infinitesimal events you'll encounter, and there's so many paradoxes. And because like the definition of infinitesimal is a number or probability that is so small it might as well be 1 over infinite, and so that means you can't really anticipate what collection of infinitesimal events you'll encounter. And it sounds like really complicated math, but if you think about it, like there's just some events that people like encounter in life and that others will never encounter. And when those events have a high magnitude impact on like that person and how they see themselves, like with respect to the rest of the world, just based on like how it changes them. I forgot what I was saying. But just yeah, it's just really interesting because it's purely informational. So this is what I'm going to do for these pictures. It's probably not going to work out very well with the formatting, but at least there's like something there. And then I can just like, so I've got this article on the neuroanalytic like conception of the human mind, and that's kind of what I'm working on right now. That's one thing I'm working on. I've got really like so many different like articles, and a lot of it like there's like system philosophers are not new. If I had to describe like my like I don't know, like I feel like I have a completely novel, or maybe not completely novel, I feel like I have a completely original conception of like sociology, which is based on social physics. However, it's not completely novel because there's a lot of people that have had the same ideas, but I think my ideas like connect it to like phenomenology, like connect social physics to phenomenology, to ontology, and I can now completely define like I can now like model like systems of government like almost mathematically, because of like how I can conceive all of these things. And then I guess another direction that I've explored in philosophy is systems philosophy, and that's what this infinitesimal stuff has to do with. The purely informational impact that infinitesimals on psychology and AI, I guess. And there's not a lot of people who can understand what I'm talking about. And then like one of the challenges that I have is that this stuff is so vast, like I don't even know really where to start. Like I have so much content to like evaluate, and a lot of it's not really like this outline is 15,000 words. And if I completed this, it would be like a book, like, or I would at least get like 100,000 words, which you could print into a 200-page book. It would really be like 100 pages, but it depends on how like what you define as a page. If you print it into a book that you publish, yeah, it really depends on how big the text is. But usually you say 100, or 1,000. 1,000 words is like 3 pages. 10,000 words is like 30 pages. So you're talking about like 15,000 words being like, what, like 50 pages? 50 pages in an outline, right? And this is all like, and the problem is like, it's very dense, very complicated stuff. And I don't really have the math chops to complete it, and I really don't have the philosophy chops to complete it. But I don't think people are thinking about things like this because I scour the internet for stuff like this, um, and it's really hard to find. And then I try to connect to people on Discord, and it's like people don't want to have a conversation with somebody who's like trying to be intellectual and trying to like really structure how they're like talking to people, and they just want to say like they just want to write one liners, like one liner, like 15-word responses to like what you're saying. And I've heard everything that they've had to say before, and I know that they haven't heard what I've had to say before, and that's not always true. Sometimes you know sometimes it's the same way, like they're the person that's heard everything I've had to say, or they're the person who's heard everything I'm going to say. But it's not very common, or at least no one responds. I don't get any response to what I'm doing, and then I have to seek it out, and I try to get on Reddit, and Reddit's like a fucking hellhole. All right, so the next one is. Oh, there's a smudge on that one. Okay, yeah, that one's funny, which is why I highlighted it and wrote what the fuck. This one's supposed to have a back on it though. And I know that nobody's gonna like. I posted the screenshots of my like outlines, my like handwritten like index card, post-it note outlines. I like. It's really not like a situation where I think somebody's gonna like scour through that and then like and read everything I have to post. I know that nobody's gonna read that shit, which it's kind of depressing. Like I've got all this stuff that I would love to like that I would love to complete. Yeah. Okay. No. Okay. Well, that's funny. And then when I'm done with it, and I've got 100 of these to do. That was one. And let me word count that real quick. So word count on that one note card is like 389 words. So I've got 100 of those that I haven't typed up yet. And then I can word count my entire like drafts folder, and it ends up being like 400,000 words in like drafts and or like outlines. Whoa. And so like I feel like I'm in the middle of like actually being able to like put together a lot of content, and I'm somebody who's unlikely to be in the situation that I am in, because it's like when somebody like flunks out of college and like like isn't really in contact with academia, it's very rare that they actually develop an awareness of what they're doing enough to like to develop new ideas, and then also be disconnected from everything, from like developments in academic fields like philosophy and math, and then manage to push things forward, and then also to like not have anyone to like judge your ideas, and like I'm being like disconnected from everything, and the intent is to make it like so that I can't really accomplish anything, and but then it's going to backfire, because like what happens is that like no one can really say that they influenced me. So you didn't influence me because I was disconnected from everything. So I didn't steal anybody's ideas. If anybody stole my ideas, it was, I mean, if anything, people will just like watch for me to post content on my like GitHub, and then just like toss it to some like somebody doing their PhD, which is why like I'm saying that like that's why I named the album, the photo album, like what I did, because it's essentially like 10,000 like PhD theses. If you consider a thesis statement as like this might contain like 2 or 3 thesis statements. So now that this one's done, I write a little fee on it, and there you go. I thought I had more about infinitesimals because they are fascinating. And somebody tried to introduce me to infinitesimals before, and I was like, "Oh yeah, I get it. It's like a number that's like so close to zero, but it's like so close to zero, it's almost infinitely close to zero." That's like the like baby introduction to infinitesimals. Like it's more about their applications, which you wouldn't really think of until you start really considering like systems theory and other things. And infinitesimals like that. It's one thing that makes data science very difficult. Like, and this is what gives big data people like real headaches. Like, they have to destructure all their calculations. Like, if your model like runs into problems with infinitesimals, you have to like tear everything apart, like basically write it in Haskell. But you have to destructure all your calculations so that they can algebraically be like lazily evaluated later, which is why Haskell is important because it like allows you to have like lazy evaluation of everything, basically. So like you can destructure things in terms of like some kind of algebra, um, and then like restructure your calculations to preserve the integrity of the numbers in your analytical like systems. And so like you might get numbers that go like way above the floating point like boundary, and you might get numbers that go way below the floating point boundary. Another area where these problems where you encounter these problems is um, in like I guess like trying to calculate the digits of pi. I mean, that's not a really good example. I mean, you just eventually get to the point. But of course, if you're calculating digits of pi, like what you're going to do is essentially like truncate like your calculation and then like carry it on and truncate your calculation, carry it on, and then you're like every part that you're calculating, you're appending it, and you're just like having like keeping track of the remainder and everything. I don't really know how. I've never really approached that problem. So I think that's everything that I'm going to do right now, just because I'm going to like each of these things are a little bit different. One of like there's a lot of them on the unconscious, but I would like to keep these so that like if so that they're topic oriented. So I think that's it. I'm gonna go ahead and end the live stream, and boom. I don't know how to do that. How do I do it, Facebook? Wow.